Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing an album review. I'm going to be taking a look at this record today, which is by The Replacements, and it is called Tim. So this was a request actually by a user called Rob Forenzes 5496. So yeah, thank you very much for requesting this. This is just a fairly recent pickup of mine. Got this, this is the Record Store Day edition that I picked up last month, and I've been really enjoying listening to this album. So yes, I thought that I would take Rob up on his request and do a review of it. So this was The Replacements' fourth studio album, released on the 18th of September in 1985. So their origins were in Minnesota. 1978 they formed, initially as a kind of punk band, yeah, essentially, yeah, like kind of very sort of noisy, thrashy, kind of like sort of like hardcore punk band. But then their third album, the boldly titled Let It Be, contained some slightly more considered material with themes such as coming of age and a kind of more melodic kind of power pop sort of feel to it, and that album got them a fair bit of critical acclaim. So by the time of this album, the band lineup had been fairly stable for the last couple of years. So you had Paul Westerberg on vocals and guitar, Chris Mars on drums, and Bob Stinson on guitar, and his brother Tommy Stinson on bass. Now, the critical success of the Let It Be album got them interest from major recording labels, something that the band were keen to embrace, like on like one hand, because even though, like I said, like Let It Be was like a well acclaimed album, like appeared like on like many like end of year best album lists for 1984, basically their contract with their label was so poor that they were not receiving any or like very little royalties for that album, with Bob Stinson apparently working part-time like in like a pizza restaurant simply to make ends meet. Now, even though financially they were maybe slightly like in like dire straits, like they didn't help themselves like to sort of like get like a recording contract like through like their live like appearances, many of which were very sloppy, including playing some very sort of poor quality like cover versions, and generally being very drunk and just sort of like not giving a damn like on stage. Although they did get lucky one night at one of their slightly better gigs when Seymour Stein from Sire Records just so happened to be in the audience, and he, like aware like the Replacements were like looking for like a new label perhaps, decided like to sign like the band up. This was something the band were quite happy like with, like they quite liked Sire like as like a label. They were I think they were part of like the Warner Brothers like empire, but like maybe the slightly more edgy kind of label. I think it was the label that like the Ramones were on, but also Talking Heads like around this time like as well. Now, this connection that Sire had with the Ramones like in particular meant that for their next album they were able to get like a slightly more like well-known producer. So in this case it was Tommy Ramone, who was the drummer like with like the Ramones, like so he came in like he came in to produce this album. I'm not sure like if he'd done too much production work kind of like prior to this, but certainly like he was someone the band like admired and I think were only too happy to be working with. However, during the making of this album, tensions within the band started to flare up. So initially they started essentially like as a partnership, kind of 50-50 partnership between Westerberg and Bob Stinson. However, by this point Stinson was becoming was starting to become slightly marginalized like in like the band. Westerberg had taken over all of the songwriting duties and had kind of pushed them away gradually from their kind of hardcore punk sound they had towards a more varied musical palette like on here. This was something that Stinson wasn't very happy about, and like during like their touring for this album shortly after it came out, like he didn't last like that full tour and left the band in 1986. Now, upon its release in September of 1985, the album got a lot of critical hype, with Rolling Stone magazine saying that it sounds as if it was made by the last real band in the world. However, commercially it was a bit of a disappointment. Again, they didn't help themselves with how they promoted this album with music videos that consisted of like a single shot looking at like a speaker, to their Saturday Night Live appearance where they again appeared drunk on stage and Westerberg swore into like the microphone live like on like American television. So yeah, commercially, this album only managed to sell 75,000 copies and peaked at number 192 on the Billboard charts. So for Sire, who were very keen to sign up the band, they maybe had some slight egg on their face, after like this album's relative commercial failure. I must also comment on the cover, which is very puzzling, and I think one of the worst album covers going. It's this weird corridor, and then this kind of upside down face, and I think these are some of the band members, but they're not very clear. It's just a bit of a mess, this cover. So this Record Store Day issue, it basically contains two mixes of the album. So you get on one disc the original mix of it, and then on the other disc you get the Ed Stason mix. Now I must say I have listened to both of them, and I do actually prefer the original mix of this album. Perhaps it's just because that's the one that's on Spotify, and that's the one that I was kind of maybe listening to preparing for this review mostly. But I did play the Stason mix on this record, and I just thought it sounded a little bit too fussy. It was kind of they were trying to highlight every single musical element in the mix. Even though on the original certain elements might have been buried, but they were kind of it all felt quite consistent. Whereas this remix just felt like there's a bit too much going on all at once. So anyway, I want to show you the vinyl copy. There's really not much to see with this. This has just got the two track lists there for the two mixes, and these are just in plain black sleeves. There's nothing really to it. This is on a purple vinyl for this particular issue of it. Okay, so I'll now go over each of the album's tracks in detail. I'll score each song out of 10 and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. So the album kicks off with the song Hold My Life. Now this is a really good song to kick off the album. It's really, again, it's a rocking track, this one here, but very immediate start. There's very little an introduction to this. It's kind of just a couple of drum hits and then the verse just starts. So it's a great way to kick off the album. The lyrics and the guitars are very fulsome sounding, and the lyrics essentially speak of a kind of desperation sort of thing to receive help with the simple chorus lyric hold my life until I'm ready to use it, being especially profound sort of thing to sort of take a talk about taking a step back from your life, evaluating where you are sort of thing. Now, the only part of the track that I maybe wasn't crazy about, initially, was the kind of razzle-dazzle stuff, he sings, in, the pre-chorus. But I've read that that's actually a reference to a children's cartoon from the 60s called Tutor Turtle. Might have just been, an American thing. But basically, the turtle, in, the cartoon, would kind of morph into sort of different characters. And then a kind of wizard would, use this, razzle-dazzle catchphrase, time for this boy to come home, he'd sing, when he was sort of morphing back into its original character. So this is something that fits in with the song, I think, actually, in terms of it's maybe slightly obscure reference that would probably go over most people's heads. It certainly did. It certainly did with mine. But I think it further emphasizes the kind of content the lyrics about you're trying to be sort of someone else kind of thing, and I think is a really good performance there. So Hold My Life will get a 9 out of 10. Next track up is called I'll Buy. Now this one is a more straight ahead kind of song, I'd say. It's got a kind of swaggedy Rolling Stones-esque guitar part on it, and but teamed with a slightly more sort of raw, unhinged vocal from Westerberg. I mean, the chorus is quite catchy, but I would have it down as one of the album's slightly weaker tracks, I'd say. I mean, it's one of these, it's maybe not quite as advanced as some of the other tracks on here. It's essentially just a kind of 50s rockabilly track with slightly louder guitars, a more unhinged vocal performance. And I'm also just not quite sure about its placement on the album. As the second track, I just think the album maybe loses a little bit of momentum with this track here, because it feels like it goes on a little bit too long, this song as well. Okay, the next track up is called "Kiss Me on the Bus." Now, this is a really, really, really good song. This is certainly since preparing for this review has become like a fast favorite of mine on the album. It's just such a catchy song. Like I've not been able to get this out of the head for the last couple of days. Like that kind of the verse the verse is very catchy, and then the chorus where it goes in a slightly different direction, direction with the chords. I think it's just really, really cleverly put together, and even musically you've got these different guitar parts and guitar tones all overlapping, and they just weave in and out. It's really well done, this song. Lyrically, the track is great as well. It talks about the kind of thrill of young love and sort of showing public affection for the first time. He sings on it if you knew how I felt now, you wouldn't act so adult now, and sort of making the making the most of this moment. Talks about says I might die before Monday on it as well. So it's just a really great adolescent kind of song, and for me we'll get a 10 out of 10. It's a really, really good track. Okay, now the next track up is called Dose of Thunder. Now this one is maybe again one of the weaker tracks on the album for me. It's just a little bit generic sound in this one here. It's a kind of throwback to their more kind of punky sort of earlier material, and lyrics are basically a kind of sort of sex, drugs and rock and roll themes, talking about essentially trying to score some drugs, and sort of how it only takes a little till you want a ton sort of thing, talking about their addictive nature. I mean, the chorus is okay, give me one good dose of thunder, but it's maybe just they were just I think capable of a whole lot more by this point, and this track does come across as album filler for me. You ain't nothing but a waitress in the sky. You ain't nothing. Next one up is called A Waitress in the Sky. Now this is probably one of the more distinctive tracks on the album. It's a really fun, light-hearted track, on the surface at least, with its jaunty music, largely acoustic instrumentation, and lyrics are inspired by Westerberg's sister, who worked as a flight attendant basically, and said I think she said to him that she felt like a waitress in the sky. So Westerberg kind of wrote this song from the perspective of a rather unpleasant sort of customer who's sort of he mentions is him sort of smoking on the plane, and sort of demanding to be treated as if he's in first class sort of thing, and generally just not being very nice to the airline hostess. So he sort of sings strutting up the aisle, big deal, you get to fly, you ain't nothing but a waitress in the sky. So I guess on first listen it can appear quite a spiteful song, but when you read about the kind of backstory of this track, and that he is inhibiting a character, it's a character song, this it's maybe a little bit easier perhaps to listen to. I mean, some people with this album I guess might classify this song as filler. It's not the most profound song, but this is a song which immediately stood out to me, certainly for its musical content. So Waitress in the Sky will get an 8 out of 10. Okay, next song up is a Swingin' Party. Now this is my favourite track on the album. It's possibly the most well-known song as well, I think, although it wasn't a single from the album. I think it, slowly over the years it has become possibly one of the Replacement's signature tracks. It's just got such a effortless melody, this one here, and a moody musical backing with a kind of touch of kind of jangle pop. The guitars are quite clean and sort of clear-cut sort of sounding, and then this kind of tortured vocal from Westerberg, with lyrics that talk about essentially being afraid, overwhelmed, if being strong's your kind, then I need help here with this feather, is one of the absolute standout tracks, and is one of the standout lines for me on the song. It's a really perfect song, really tender track. They don't overdo it either. They just keep it they just play it straight. It doesn't build too much either. I think it just kind of is just a really perfect song, I think, albeit only in its original mix, because this is one of the tracks particularly where I felt that the Ed Station remix really, I don't say destroyed the song, but it lost a lot of its character, and its magic for me. They were just trying to, there's too many parts on that remix fighting for attention. So really the original mix lyrics like is like the way to go, and that would get like without a doubt a 10 out of 10. Next up on the album, flipping over to side 2 now, is Bastards of Young. Now this one is a real rallying cry sort of song for, and like sort of about like a dissatisfied like generation. The first lines, you know, like on it could be a reference to like the band's like own success, like God, what a mess on the ladder of success, where you take one step and miss the whole first rung, dreams unfulfilled, graduate unskilled, he sings on it. And it's just got, again, a great kind of sing-along chorus to it, some great guitar work like throughout like the track. Again, this is a song which I think mixes their kind of punky roots sort of thing, but with lyrics that actually mean something and like actually like a good piece of songwriting, really. Now this song is also notable as it was one of the tracks that they played on their 1986 appearance on Saturday Night Live, where they apparently they turned like the instruments like way up loud, like sort of like beyond like what like they'd essentially rehearsed like in sound check. They were visibly drunk like on the stage, and they earned themselves like a lifetime ban like for like their performance like on it. But no, this is just such a like anthemic track. It's like an uplifting song like as well, like I think. So yeah, Bastards of Young would get a 10 out of 10. Next up on the album is called Lay It Down Clown. Now this is, along with Dose of Thunder, one of the more kind of punky throwback tracks, and again it just comes off like a little bit like as filler for me. Again, lyrically, it continues the kind of album's themes of kind of substance abuse. He sings like skinny as a rail, you think you've got what it takes, the only exercise you ever get is the shakes. It's just kind of, lyrically, rock and roll excess like on this one here. It's like a slight track for me, like on the album, doesn't really do a whole lot. Next one up on the album is called Left Off the Dial. Now, this is one of the more celebrated and well-loved tracks on the album. This one was actually produced by Alex Chilton of Big Star. I think he was originally earmarked to produce the whole album, but I think either he felt or the band felt that they maybe weren't quite ready to record like when like they were working like with him, so I think he then produced their follow-up album, possibly, like I'm not sure, but this was like the only real output from like their sessions, and it's a really good song here. It's essentially like an ode to college radio stations, which were like in like America, like quite low down like sort of numbers, like on like your AM sort of scale like sort of thing. So you'd basically you tune your radio to stations to the left of the dial kind of thing, and it's kind of like talks about, I think there's a line about sweet Georgia breezes could perhaps be like a reference like to like REM. But Westerberg has said that the song was primarily inspired by a relationship he was in with a singer-guitarist called Lynn Blakely, who was in another band like at the time. So kind of Westerberg would sort of like when like they were both on tour, they'd kind of try and tune into these stations to hear like each other's music, like sort of thing. For me though, it's maybe not a absolute favourite like on the album. I just think musically it's maybe a little bit less memorable. I mean, like it's got like a good like ebb and flow sort of like in like the verses where it kind of like instruments drop out and then they come back in again, but like I just think like the chorus is maybe a little bit like on like the weaker side with this song. Are you ever wanted for someone to take care? Okay, the penultimate track now is called Little Mascara. Now this one is a narrative based track, essentially about like a failing relationship and sort of struggling, like sort of like young, like inexperienced sort of woman, essentially sort of trying to bring up like a family kind of thing, with eventually the kind of like male like in like the relationship sort of like leaving. He sings like, for the kids you stay together, all you ever wanted was someone to take care of you. And this kind of like this chorus line about like all you're ever losing like is like little mascara, essentially about this woman sort of like crying essentially. So it's a clever metaphor like sort of thing, and the tone of the track like is unusually quite tender like for them, like and quite like melancholic, like even though musically is quite loud and like in like your face. And the kind of narrative-based lyrics do make a change from the more, introspective or more like alcohol, drug sort of based songs like on this album. It's like, again, got a great melody on it and is just a great song there. So yeah, Little Mascara would get a 9 out of 10. Here comes Okay, and then the record closes with Here Comes a Regular. Now, this is a much more lower key kind of closing track, essentially about Westerberg's growing like alcohol like addiction, and how it's kind of like made him lonely and like isolated, and also like on this talks about like ashamed sort of thing, like of being like a regular visitor to like his local pub. Basically, he sings like, well, a person can work up a mean thirst after a hard day of nothing much at all, and sometimes I just ain't in the mood to take my place with the loudmouths, he sings on it. And it kind of alludes as well to him being like unhappy despite being like in like a successful band. He sings like all I know is I'm sick of everything that my money can buy, the fool who wastes his life. So it's quite depressing stuff, this song here, and it's quite melodramatic. A lot of string, I think there's a string section like on it, like, or certainly like at least like synthesized strings on it, and it's a good closing track. I think like this song could only really work like as like the album closer. It's probably not one that I would necessarily seek out with the album, but I do think closes things off quite well. So yeah, Here Comes a Regular would get an 8 out of 10. Okay, so this album would get an overall score of 83%. So I think this is a really, really great album here. It's probably their best, although I don't quite know the follow-up, which is called Pleased to Meet Me. I don't know that album awfully well, but I'd say like on balance it probably is stronger than their previous album, Let It Be. I just think it's got the best mix on it, like in terms of musical styles. You've got a couple of throwback tracks to like their early punk stuff, but then you've got like some great like anthemic rockers with sort of like like coming of age lyrics, and sort of like stuff like Bastards of Young and like Hold My Life, as well as more like introspective stuff, Swinging Party, like in like particular is just such a great ballad. And then kind of like some slight diversions as well, things like Waitress in the Sky and like Kiss Me on the Bus. There's just got so many great songs like on this album that once like you sort of like you delve into it. And yeah, like overall the Replacements are just a really underrated band. Like I think, you know, they kind of they were very much prone to self-sabotage, really, you know, like they refused to play by the rules, and basically just it meant that, you know, like they probably were with this album like on the cusp of reaching like a wider audience, but yeah, just absolutely shot themselves again like the foot with like kind of like not appearing like in like the music video, or like not making like sort of like music videos that MTV like would want to like sort of like show, by performing live very sloppily, and like also like their infamous appearance like on Saturday Night Live like as well. They refused to sort of play by the rules, and I think, as you know, for fans of theirs is kind of what makes them special, and like sort of like a unique band. But no, I hope you have enjoyed my review there of the album Tim by The Replacements. So yes, if you've got any requests for future reviews, please do leave them down below in the comments. That's how like I ended up like filming like this like video, like as I said, like it was requested. So yeah, thanks very much again to Rob Ferronzes who requested it. And yep, I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye. Turn your back on a pay your back last call.